All right, let's bring on Athena Perez here. Athena, first off, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. How are you doing today?
I'm awesome. What an honor to be here. I appreciate it, guys.
The honor is all ours. Definitely, it's on this side of the table. Uh, First off, we have a lot to talk about, but why did you decide to write the book?
Uh, well, there were a lot of drivers. The first one was my faith. I felt like it was something that I was being called to do. The other one stemmed from a lot of the response from the very first CrossFit video that Coslap and Tyson had commissioned. It got a lot of response, and a lot of the people that were reaching out were saying stuff like, "Hey, Athena, I have this story, and this happened to me. It wasn't anything like what you went through, but." And there was always a but, and it always used to break my heart to hear that, because I've always believed that everything that we go through is relative, right? Our stories look different, but they feel the same. So, somebody that experiences the loss of a dog, or somebody that experiences the loss of someone very close to them, that feeling, that pain that they feel is identical. So I felt, maybe if I take this first step and just get it out there, maybe it will empower other people to be willing to share theirs too.
And so for anyone that's listening that may not be familiar, Athena, your book, Lifting the Weight, as it's called, it dropped this week, right?
It dropped digitally. It'll
Yeah.
drop on paperback at the end of the month.
Oh, awesome. And so we met you a handful of years ago when you came to headquarters and got to spend some time with us. And and we met you. It was during was it team series, right? It was.
Yes.
Yeah, I think and then I talked to her during the Open as well.
Eons ago.
It feels like it. Yeah. 2 years ago.
Yeah. When you, and it was Chase came out too.
Emma.
Yeah. A big collection of people that really, it was an awesome week, but your story goes back for the book well beyond that. So for anyone that's maybe just hearing about this for the first time, what is kind of the structure in bones of the book and its subject?
Mm-hmm. So the first like 2 chapters kind of gets us to like an introduction as to like how the book started, what the inspiration for the book was, why I felt like kind of like why I needed to write it. And then it talks about, it doesn't go all the way, Athena was born in, 19, whatever. It's not an autobiography. So it starts off kind of when the journey started, and it tells the perspective of what happened to me from a therapist chair.
And
so it kind of starts there.
Without giving too much away, what is that initial story to kind of give people an idea of what to expect?
The story of
the early couple chapters. So you talk about the beginning of your story from the therapist chair. What is the nature of that beginning, I guess?
Sure. Well, it starts basically talking about the very things that appeared in that first CrossFit video. Starts off by kind of where the problem started, which is when I was really young. And the first couple chapters kind of just talks about what that felt like and how food became a problem for me.
And so anyone that's listening, there was also an article that ran in Morning Chalk Up that detailed some of those issues, whether it was, your stepmother force feeding you,
right?
Locking you in a room for 10 days, and it kind of created these issues around food.
Right.
Where does, I guess, kind of being able to put that on paper and kind of almost kind of relive that, I guess. What was that experience like of trying to be able to capture that on the pages of a book?
I was underprepared for what I was going to go through writing this thing. You think you're healed. And then you sit down to write, and you have to remember enough detail to be able to tell the story in a way that somebody's going to be able to picture themselves being there. And taking your brain back there is, it was brutal. So you have to go through all of those experiences all over again, not just in the healing process, but just to be able to put it on paper. Yeah, like you were saying, it was hard.
We were talking before we came on here about, why you titled the book the way you titled it, and spelling weight differently than what most people think how
right.
to spell it, and that this is not necessarily a weight loss journey book. It's more about kind of what you went through.
Right.
Why do we often overlook the mental aspects of weight loss and just kind of view it as purely a physical thing?
Right. I think that's one of the things that I've experienced the most, just especially being in the CrossFit community. I think there's this, misconception that somebody that walks into a box that needs to lose weight, they just like eating, and we're just gonna, we'll create some plan, and we're gonna put some nice macros together, and it's gonna solve everything. And it's way more complicated than that, because food is used as that thing that we go to. So unless you correct whatever the reason is that's driving you to use food as a coping mechanism, you're never really going to solve the problem. So it doesn't matter, what macro plan that a coach is going to put somebody on. They got to get to the root of what's wrong before they can correct the physical side of it.
I feel like, just speaking from a everyday CrossFitter perspective, I feel like we are familiar with the physical side of it. So that's where our mind tends to go to, as far as that's what we can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
What has been kind of maybe the feedback from, because I know you've mentioned that people have reached out to you since then. What has maybe been the feedback from people that have been able to read the book and have been able to hear your story so far?
Oh, wow. Response has really been all over the board. I've heard from coaches that have said, wow, I need to approach maybe this demographic a little bit differently. I've heard from the community that has said, you know what, there's a little something for everybody in this thing. It's not like, if you pick it open and you read it, it's not just for people that need to lose weight. There's a little something for everybody. It's they've just, the feedback has been that it's very relatable on a ton of levels.
Let's go back into your story. And when was the moment for you that you made the decision to say, I am going to change things right now?
In the book, there's a chapter in there where the physical part of my body, I just felt like was giving out. It was around Christmas time, and I couldn't visit my family out on the West Coast because I had gotten too big to fly. So when I say that, I probably could have gotten 2 seats, or I might have been able to buy a first class ticket, but my fear wasn't the seat. My fear was being able to get from the parking lot down to the gate. I wouldn't have been able to walk that far. And so I stayed home that year. It was the first Christmas that I'd ever spent by myself. And, I was alone in my house, and bawling my eyes out, and, screaming at the higher power. And I thought my legs had given out, and it was bad. I walked into the kitchen, and I just kind of wanted it to be all over. And when I say that, I mean, there was a big bottle of hydrocodone in there, and I thought, well, how many is it going to take to just have it be all over?
I think that's unfortunately, it's a dark place and it's a place that not a lot of people can, I guess, comprehend.
Right.
So in that moment, what was it that pulled you from that place and turned you from wanting to end it in that way to wanting to rewrite it another way move forward?
It sounds crazy, but I had a dream, and I believed it was divine intervention. And things just connected, and I saw things that I don't know how I would have seen any other way. And it was just a silly dream, and it had a lot of silly things in it. And there was a gym and scenes that I didn't recognize, but I knew that was just the direction that I needed to go. It happened kind of like for a week, and I talk about what had happened, but it was that seventh day that I kept having these, call them whatever you want to call them, dreams. I just woke up and I think that we all kind of inherently know what we need to do to start making changes. We know what we're supposed to be eating. I think naturally we understand the difference between what probably is not a good choice and what might be healthy. So that part of it wasn't that difficult. It was just, that's the direction that I started. So for that first month, it was just diet changes. There wasn't anything else new introduced. Just getting rid of everything I knew probably wasn't good for me.
Well, you touch on something there that I think is important, because I mean, we all can kind of get a sense of once you get the inertia going,
yeah,
and things become habits, and it's able to get a little bit going. But the hardest part for a lot of people, and there are probably people that may listen to this and they're in that moment, is that first step, right? That kind of almost leap of faith into the unknown. You touched on a little bit there, but I mean, from an emotional standpoint, what was that first month like for you? And what were maybe some victories or, small obstacles that you had to get over?
I think it was just like, I think one of the things that made the biggest difference for me, it was just how I talked to myself about food. One of the corrections that had to be made in those first couple weeks was not limiting myself. Let me see if I can explain this. I didn't want there to be restrictions, because I felt like restrictions were what were causing a lot of the problems. So when I say that, I mean like, Athena, you can't have this, you can't have this, you can't have this. I left it completely open, and I wanted it to be more of an empowering thing. Like, you can have whatever you want, but are you going to make the right choice? It was more like I wanted so badly to be able to be strong enough to make the right decision and not feel like I was being punished. This weight problem, I needed to get over the fact that this was not a punishment. You know what I mean? Like, I forgive myself for using food, but now we got to do something, and you're not going to be punished. If you have something that's not healthy, you take it one day at a time. So I'm not going to think about next week or next month. I'm just going to do today. And I said, can you stay on your plan today? And when you think about it like that, staying on it for one day, hey, can I stick to my plan today, sounds a whole lot easier than saying, hey, can I stick on this plan for the next month? That sounds scary. So taking it one day at a time, as much as of a cliche that might sound, makes a difference.
How did you then wind up inside a CrossFit gym?
So, a friend of mine kept getting tagged. He was somebody that I knew, not really a close friend, but he kept getting tagged on his Facebook. And initially, I mean, I knew it was a CrossFit gym. I don't know anything about CrossFit, but I was trolling his page one night, looking at the pictures of this gym, and he kept getting tagged by a personal trainer, a friend of his. And so I went to their page, started reading, and I felt like, well, that's the direction that I need to go. And maybe, this person can just help me walk again. Because we couldn't even think about, CrossFit wasn't like an initial thought at all. One, because I didn't think I was going to be able to do it ever. The initial, hey, we need to make some changes. I needed to get off my canes. So just learning how to walk unassisted was the first goal.
And what was it like for you stepping foot into that facility for the first time?
Oh, it was terrifying. It was so, my first experience in a box was the last day of the open.
Oh man.
In 2017. So it was the last night of the open. They said, hey, we're having this get together. You should come down and check it out. And then of course, that's what I walk into. And, every part of me was like, I absolutely don't belong here.
And so then how do you go from I don't belong here to coming to a place where, you come back, you kind of, maybe fall in love with it a little bit, or start to get to a place where, like, your experience is pretty common. Like, a lot of people are intimidated by it and they think they get that I don't belong here, but there is a pathway to understanding, that maybe it is for me. And I'm curious what that was for you.
To your point, right? I think if you talk to any single CrossFitter, this is weight aside, I haven't met a single CrossFitter that didn't tell me that they were terrified that first day. It doesn't matter what size they are, right? It's terrifying for all of us, right? Again, maybe it wasn't quite as scary for me because in my mind, I was never going to do CrossFit. I looked at what everybody else was doing as ridiculous. In fact, there was a girl that I met there that night. This couple was sitting there, and this couple had looked over and they said, hey, a year from now, that's going to be you out there on the floor. And I was like, that's the most ridiculous thing I have ever heard. And I laughed it off thinking, they were just being funny. And I started going, just working with this trainer, just trying to figure out how to walk. And I don't know what it was. I was just drawn to the barbell. And, I would go in kind of in my off time and I'd pick this thing up, and I don't know, there was just some connection to me and the barbell. And then I was invited to, to go watch a class. And by that time I'd been going there working with this trainer for a while. And the girls said, just come and watch a class. So I figured I would try it. And that's kind of how it started. One class. It wasn't a CrossFit class. It was a boot camp class. And it's just CrossFit without the barbell. That's all it is. But I ended up going to this boot camp class once, and then it turned into twice. And every time it was like, well, after I got over the feeling of, feeling like I was dead, I would say, well, that wasn't so bad. I'm gonna try it one more time. And then it just kind of snowballed from there.
What were some of the things that maybe the coaches or the members of that gym did to help you get over your fear a little bit and to keep you coming back on a regular basis?
One of the very first things that I think helped me, and I would say this is probably true for every box out there, it was just the community was just that supportive. I'd never had high fives and little slaps on the back saying, hey, great job. And I'd be in the middle of trying really hard to learn the movements and to work out, and it always seemed like I got the loudest claps and the loudest cheers. And because you're getting people that are clapping for you, you don't want to quit. So it worked.
And so, your journey with CrossFit is going, and we had the chance to come out to HQ and do some cool things, tell your story a little bit. And I'm curious, I feel like anytime you kind of go and there's a little bit of self-discovery that happens anytime you touch and step into something that's scary or fearful for you, and manage to kind of keep pushing through it. And I'm curious, what did you learn about yourself during this time period when you started to kind of unturn the CrossFit stones and, integrate yourself into the gym, and you start to, drop some weight and become more physically capable and do some of these things that we know that CrossFit is capable of doing for people?
I didn't know when I started that I could do all those things. Granted, it might look a little bit different, but I thought that stuff was, how do I say this? I looked at those athletes in that box like they can do this stuff because they were born with this gift, and it was one that, I didn't have. So I guess all that self-talk over a lifetime, I never thought that it was going to be something that I would love and enjoy. And I think once you, who was it? I wrote about it in my book. He's a CrossFit level 3, John
Gilson.
There you go. He wrote this article, and he was talking about, it starts off as a workout, right? But then all of a sudden it becomes something that you start taking outside the box. So then you start noticing all these things in your outside life. Like you go through the worst crap in a workout in that morning, right? And then you leave the box, and suddenly everything else that happens that day is not quite as bad because you've already been through hell that morning. So everything else that follows after that it's like, well, this isn't so bad. And then you start attacking things in your life just like you would a WOD, right?
Yeah.
1 rep at a time. So everything in life outside the box becomes that way too. Well, just do one thing at a time, one thing at a time, one thing at a time. It transforms it transforms everything in your life.
When did you start to really see and feel a difference in your health and your ability to start to live the life you wanted to live?
That's a tough one, because as a heavy person, you see yourself differently in the mirror. I still see myself in the mirror sometimes as the person that has all this weight still to lose. You see yourself as you were. So that's been a challenge this entire time. It comes very slow. But I think once I had hit that first threshold of I ended the first year with 187 lost.
Wow.
And I think once I hit that goal, it was like, wow, maybe this is possible.
And so I kind of want to touch on something that's, I guess, has happened since we last physically saw you.
Yeah.
And to now, because the journey is always ongoing. And I know that there's some things that I feel like CrossFit does, and you touched on a little bit, that makes you a little bit more resilient outside of the gym as well. I know you've gone through an injury and surgery on your knee, correct?
Yeah, both.
Well, how do you feel what you learned in the gym and in your journey to now helped you in that process? Because something like that, it can be devastating for some people.
It was for me too.
Yeah.
I did not think that, well, for people that don't know, I had to get double knee replacements, and one of the legs was much, much more difficult than the other. So here I am, I go from being on this high, right? Come back from team series, and there's still all this buzz. And then all of a sudden I find out that it's, the legs have had enough. And Athena, you're essentially going to have to put everything that you've done and everything that you've worked on hold. And now there's consequences to having weight on your joints for that long. And now it's time to pay up. And so I go out, thought it was just going to be a couple weeks, came back and didn't realize that I was going to have to learn how to do everything that I learned how to do all over again. So when I say that, I really mean everything. You have to learn how to walk again after knee surgery. And then you have to figure out you got to learn, you're starting at ground zero. So when I first went back to the box, I used to sling around hundreds of pounds in deadlifts, and that first day, I couldn't deadlift 50 pounds. And I thought, oh my gosh, it's over. Like, it's really over. It was devastating. But I found a coach, and he has helped me back.
How do you battle through those times? And I'm sure that wasn't the only time during this whole journey where you had, been in a dark place or been like, I'm going to quit, I'm done. How do you battle through that and keep going?
Well, we use that term a lot, right? The darkness in CrossFit. And it's something that you just kind of learn to embrace. I think that for me, I've been to that dark place many, many times. So every time you visit, I think you just come out a little bit stronger, and you learn, hey, this is something I can get through. And then the next time that you're in a dark place, you come out with different lessons, but you're just a little bit stronger every time. So I knew when I looked back, it was hard. The surgeries were difficult, and that was brutal too. But I look back on everything that I have made it through, and I'm like, I'm not going to let this get me this time. It was hard, but I've been through way worse.
So I kind of want to circle back to the book just a little bit.
Okay.
And because you're touching on, some of the lessons and things that you've gotten along the way.
Yeah.
And there's an element to the book that I really liked that is at the end of each chapter. And I don't want to give too much away, but there's a little bit kind of a little golden nugget at the end of each chapter for people. What did that kind of inspiration come from for those lessons that you helped provide? And you had some pretty awesome people help contribute in that. I think that's a really cool element. So can you touch on that just a bit?
Yeah. They initially started out as just little tiny, 2 or 3 sentences. And Greg Amundsen, who is publishing the book, and he's been my mentor in this, he said, wouldn't it be great if we made those, a little bit bigger? And initially when he said it, I was like, this is going to be way more work. I thought I was done with the book, and I was struggling trying to figure out, I can't even think about writing 17 more pages, This is impossible. And initially I was trying to make the work a little easier. But then it got to where the more I thought about it, it just made sense. Wow, how could I bring these people in to demonstrate that you don't have to be on a weight loss journey, and you don't have to be on a journey like mine in order to feel the same things that I felt. Everybody has experienced anger. Everybody has experienced that dark place. Everybody's experienced all kinds of things, and they look a little different, but they all feel the same. And I thought, wow, wouldn't that be great if I could pull these people in to work with me on these lessons and be able to share with the community, we're all in this together. It's not your story, my story. We're all in this thing together.
Totally. And you've got some cool contributors and people that you mentioned in the beginning of the book. Some of whether it's Tasia Persevich, our friend Dave Eubanks, Chase Knight, who was out there slanging some weight at the team series with everyone.
Yep.
Roy McKernan, Tyson Oldroyd, Kozlap, obviously,
Yep.
Sarah, Al, Jennifer. I'm just listing them off, and Justin. What did you learn about? Is there anything that maybe you learned or look back and can kind of value in being able to work with this collection of individuals from that process?
Oh, yeah. So for each lesson, what we would do is we would, we'd have a phone talk first. Sometimes it would be anywhere from an hour to a couple hours, just talking about okay, here's the lesson. How can we blend our stories together. Tasia was one of those lessons where I learned so much more than I did not know these things. I didn't know some of her backstory. I didn't know, some of the things that she had gone through. And again, because those feelings are all identical, it was easy to talk about because that's how we relate is, oh, wow, that just struck my heart. I can feel that. That's how we relate to one another. And so again, they didn't need to look the same. All they needed to do was feel the same, and we could both talk about it on the same level, if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally.
You said that there's something in the book for everybody, regardless of what their journey has been. What are you hoping that people come away with after reading your work?
I think I'm hoping that one of the takeaways for people is just to honor your story and be proud of your story. I think a lot of us, including myself, try to run from it. We were, embarrassed to talk about it, embarrassed to share it with people, but doing that is what helps other people, and it helps them feel like they're not by themselves. So I'm hoping it helps people share theirs. Hope it gives them, a door so that they can share theirs.
Yeah. And so you've done something that I feel like a lot of people say they want to do, but they don't understand what goes into actually writing a book.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious from a writing and a book making perspective, what are maybe some snags that you didn't expect that you hit along the way, or some kind of like, oh man, moments where something kind of popped up, a speed bump, if you will, along the way. And it's okay. You can throw Rory under the bus, because I know since where he was involved, there's always going to be a snag.
Ro was stalling everything up. He's going to laugh. Let's see. Okay. So one of the biggest things I learned was it's a very humbling process. So what do I mean by that? So you have this first draft. You send it to your editor. My editor was Andrea. You guys know Andrea?
Yeah.
And the first draft was a little brutal because you write all these extraneous details that you don't need. And some of the feedback would come back like, hey, how is this paragraph relevant? And in your mind, you're like, well, it's my story. How is it not relevant?
Yeah.
And, like,
you get a little defensive.
Yeah. And so on a couple levels, I really had to dig deep and be like, okay, I get what she's saying. It doesn't take away from the fact that it happened to you, but it doesn't help you illustrate what you're trying to say here. This needs to go. So that was a big learning curve for me. And then just trying to figure out how to tell it. How do I tell this story in a way that's going to keep people interested and want to keep reading? Right?
Yeah, totally.
If there are people out there who are listening to this and they know someone, or they are someone who's going through some sort of similar journey to you, what do they need to know about either helping that person or helping themselves get through it?
I think that, I've come across a lot of those people already, just in feedback and comments. And I know from my soul that there is hope because I've lived it and I've gotten to have that. And I don't think it matters how far down the rabbit hole you go or how dark that place is, you can get out of it. But I also think that in every journey, there's a lot of personal responsibility, and it's a lot of humility and being able to be okay with, one, where you're at, and two, accepting your role. And for a lot of us, our role is much bigger than we want to admit. But man, there's hope on the other side. And I feel like I'm there. So I know it's possible.
And I only have one more question, just kind of going off of that. Do you feel like, it's pretty straightforward, when you mentioned accepting your role in it,
Yeah.
me, that resonates with the concept of ownership. And do you
Yeah.
feel like by taking ownership of your role, you're able to actually, on the flip side of it too, be able to take ownership in the successes that come from that as a result?
Yes. Yes. I think that was one of the biggest takeaways for me, was just accepting my part. Like, so maybe an example would be, I was okay with people like in my family and other people saying, you know, you don't understand why Athena's heavy. You don't know her life. You don't know where she's been. And I was okay with people saying that. I never corrected it. But I do correct it now, because it's, yes, those things happened, but I know that I am fully responsible for whatever happens going forward. No, I wasn't responsible, or I didn't know up till the time I was 10, but I certainly do now. You know, the things I told myself, I would call myself fat. I would call myself ugly. I would call myself, you know, horrible words. And I realized that this became my dialogue. Nobody else did that to me. I did. So when I say personal responsibility, I mean, half of this stuff I did to myself, whether I knew it or not. But yeah, like, I think when you get to a point where you realize that and you're like, man, I can correct that, that's where your power comes from, you know?
This will be my last question as well, but I think about everything you've been through and where you were when you said, you know, you were in a really dark place and thinking about,
Yeah.
there's a bottle of pills over there, to where you are now, having written a book. You're going to open your own affiliate.
Yeah.
Your story has inspired so many people. But what are you the most proud of when you look back at how far your journey has taken you?
The one thing I'm most proud of, that I could share it and that I could talk about it. I did the work so that I can talk about it in a more matter-of-factly way, instead of coming from a place of it hurting. You will always remember that something happened, but you can get to a point where it doesn't hurt when you talk about it. You recognize it's a part of your past and it's part of what made you who you are, but it's not going to define who you are.
That's great. We always appreciate you taking the time to share your story with us, Athena. And it's been too long since we got a chance to talk to you, so I'm glad we got to catch up today.
I love you guys, and thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure. Best of luck with the book, and I hope we don't go years between conversations.
I hope not.
Yeah, well, got to do a better job of keeping up with Athena here.
Exactly, and hopefully we can like actually get together in person once all this quarantine stuff is lifted.
Agreed.
Yes.
Remind everyone when and where they can get your book once it hits outside of the digital space.
Okay. Outside the digital space, they'll be able to pick it up on Amazon. They'll also be able to pick it up at Barnes & Noble.
Awesome. And it's available digitally is it download for purchase or?
Yeah, they can find it digitally. I mean, pretty much anywhere. It's in the Apple Store. It's on Google Play. It's on it's Barnes & Noble Digital, Amazon. I mean, you can pretty much pick it up on any of the major carriers for digital. Mm-hmm. Print will be at the end of July, Barnes & Noble and Amazon.
Sweet.
All right. Well, best of luck. I know it's going to sell very well, and I hope people, like you said, who may not, it's for you. You might not think it's for you. Go and read it. You're going to learn something. So, Athena, thank you so much for sharing your experience with us, and we look forward to seeing you and talking.